Good evening again. It is your man, your host, the Variable Y here with the Variable Y Minute. And today we are going to talk about the college football playoff. Now, normally I don't like to talk about the college football playoff when it first starts because there's still so much football left to be played. I think the first poll came out maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago. That's a whole that's a whole month with football left to play. That's a whole month before you got all your big games. It's a whole month before you got your LSU Alabamas, your Georgia Auburns, your Ohio State Michigans, your Ohio State Penn States, your Michigan whoever, your Pac-10 big game, your Oklahoma big game, and whoever's kicking tires around in the ACC. So you've got all these big games to play, so I don't pay any attention to the polls that early. I don't pay any attention to the polls. I don't pay any attention to the college football playoff rankings until we get to the end of the regular season, which is where we are now. So now we are at a point where your man, the variable, is looking at the rankings. And the rankings came out last night, and they didn't change at all. It was number one Ohio State, number two LSU, number three Clemson, and number four Georgia. Obviously, number one and number four are going to play each other this weekend in the SEC championship game. Ohio State is going to play Minnesota in or Wisconsin, excuse me, in the Big Ten championship game, and Clemson is going to play Virginia in the SEC in ACC championship game. Excuse me. So I anticipate those top three seeds all winning, them all going to the playoff, which would make for a very interesting turn of events because that leaves number four, that leaves that spot wide open. So if Georgia loses, obviously they're out. What if Georgia wins, though? Let's circle back around to that just a little bit later. But Georgia loses and they're out. So if Oklahoma blows the doors off of Baylor, do they get in above Utah? Because I believe Utah is ranked number five now. Utah is ranked five. Oklahoma is ranked six. So if Oklahoma blows the doors off of Baylor, or even if Oklahoma just barely wins, but Utah loses, then I think Oklahoma is there, and that would make 3 years in a row that Oklahoma gets there. So you've got that scenario. And then what if Oklahoma loses and Utah wins the Pac-12 by beating Oregon? Is Utah going to go to the playoff? I'm not really sure because according to what some people think, the country doesn't want to see Utah no matter what. And then, like I said, you got this kind of crazy scenario. I won't say dream scenario, especially living out here. I don't want anybody to think I have a bias, but I think it would just be crazy. I do want to see the chaos. I do want to see what will happen if this happens. What if Georgia beats LSU? So does that mean that LSU drops maybe down to three? Georgia leaps to maybe well, I guess LSU would have to drop to four. Georgia would leap up to number three because they win their conference and they would beat the number two team, so they would have to be better than them. LSU's been undefeated all year and has looked pretty good, and they've had like two or three of the most impressive wins of the season. So you got to put them up there. And of course, if LSU or Ohio State and Clemson win, you're not going to drop them down either. So I guess what we're saying is Georgia holds all the cards for chaos. And if you all don't know anything about me, know when it comes to college football, I am an agent of chaos. I hate how buttoned up and how silly college football can be. I've always hated the fact that they used to vote on their national champion, not play it out on the field. I hated the fact that they voted on their BCS teams, not, conference champions and have a playoff. I hate the fact that in the football bowl subdivision, they can't figure out a playoff. But in the football championship subdivision, they can figure out a playoff, and they've been doing it for years. Teams like Georgia Southern, teams like around here, Valdosta State, Teams like uh, Albany State, I guess. I don't know if they have a team. Whatever. You guys know what I'm saying. These teams have figured out a way to Appalachian State, although they moved up, they figured out a way to have a playoff and actually play it out on the field and have an NCAA football championship. One thing that gets lost is that on the major college football level, they have a college football playoff national championship, but not an NCAA national championship. The NCAA does not award that title because they don't have an actual playoff. They vote to see who the champion is. And I've always hated that. And I've always hated the fact that people act like they can't go to a playoff system. And even now that they're in a 14 playoff, people say if you extend it to 16, oh, well, then that's just going to minimize the regular season. For once and for all, let's just bring this out and let's just break it down so it is forever broken. You can't minimize a regular season that only has 12 games. Every game is important. It's not the college basketball regular season where there are three times as many games. It's not it's not the NBA season where there are four times as many games. It's not the baseball season where there are over 10 times as many games. There are only 12 of these things. So no matter how many teams you put in the playoff, there are only 12 games to decide who gets in the daggone playoff, which means that all of these games, they matter. And let's be clear. Another stupid thing they say is every week is a playoff. That's not true, because if every week were a playoff, then Auburn, wouldn't they be playing for a national championship? But hell no. They're not even playing for their conference. They won their playoff game this last week, didn't they? What are you going to tell me? They didn't win the playoff game against Georgia? So how are they playing a playoff game against Alabama? And if they're playing the playoff game against Alabama and they win, shouldn't they be advancing in the playoffs? Think about that next time. But again, you know, some people love this stuff. And I watch it. It's entertaining, but I just hate all the talking that goes back and forth because of it. So that's just me. That's just my opinion on this night, guys. That will be all tonight. We ran a little bit over, but that's cool with me if it's cool with you. I thank you all so much for joining me. Again, leave your comments down below. Catch me on the YouTube channel at The Variable Y Minute. And of course, you've already caught me on Instagram where it's The Variable, or it's just Variable Y, excuse me. I've been your Variable Y, your host, and I thank you guys so much for joining me. And I'll see you later. Have a good night, everyone.